I don't want to, separate myself from XJ because this is a decision we ultimately made together. But I do think it's fair to say, and I hope you don't mind me saying it, I was a bit more sympathetic to the idea that, like, okay, like Edwards and Curry are very close in terms of impact, or at least sort of close in terms of impact. One is the best player on the best team in the West. One is the best player on a team that wouldn't even be in the play-in right now. Maybe that should just be the decision, and that's probably the decision that coaches are going to ultimately. Well, I'd imagine both Steph and Edwards get in actually on the actual All-Star team, but I am very sympathetic to that. So I think your opinion is actually more important here, because while I do understand why Steph is just a better and more valuable player, like in a vacuum, just because everything we've always talked about across these last 15 weeks or whatever, the additive nature of his impact, just how valuable his gravity is. I do think if you're isolating it just for these first 40 some odd games, it's a bit more nuanced. And so I think, I'd love to hear you break down why you think even across a season like this, even when the Timberwolves have been so good and the Warriors have been so wildly mediocre, why you think that Steph's impact has been greater than Edwards.
Yeah, so I'm going to be extreme on this one, and I feel like I've been oddly extreme across the all-star choice conversations, which is kind of funny. But I don't weigh team success at all in this discussion. Like, it's not even like, the only way I would weigh it is if teams were like, or if two players were almost exactly the same and it was like a tiebreaker. But in terms of like trying to figure out who should make the all-star team success is essentially irrelevant to me. And this is because when you make this team success argument, you are essentially punishing a player for having worse teammates for which he has no control over, right? Like, it doesn't matter what the team success is, because the team success is not, it only matters insofar as like the player is responsible for the team success. Like, if Anthony Edwards, let's say, was on the Warriors, I think there's no chance they'd even be as good as they have been, with Draymond in and out, with excuse me, Andrew Wiggins, who has been, and I've said this to you over text, I think has been the most damaging individual player in the entire NBA with regard to the number of games he's played, the number of minutes he's played, and how bad he's been. I think there's no player in the NBA who's been as damaging as Andrew Wiggins. And Steph Curry has to play with Andrew Wiggins, and there could be a whole host of reasons for it. I'm not going to speculate, and this is not who Wiggins has been over the course of his career. Even at his worst points in Minnesota, he hasn't been like this, besides maybe like his rookie season. But I just think that you're essentially saying, sorry, Steph, you're playing with Wiggins and this crew that's been awful, and like this awful version of Kevon Looney and Draymond being in and out and all of these situations and an injured Chris Paul and sorry, that's your situation. So you're not an all-star. If we're making all-star about team success, then to me, we would have a entirely different all-star team then, and that would just be a different. It would just be a different team, right? It would be about, like, actually Mensa, who I do a pod with at Knicks Film School and on Casual Friday at Knicks Film School. Mensa thinks that the All-Star team should be based on team success, because he thinks the All-Star game should be a vehicle to incentivize winning. And if this was a vehicle to incentivize winning, then I would say, yeah, for sure, you can do it that way. But if we're talking about who's individually been excuse me, the best or most impactful or most valuable players in the league, and that's who we're going to put in, team success is just not a relevant factor to that, because we have to imagine the players, if swapped in terms of their situations, what those outcomes would be. So that's why it's not really a relevant factor to me.
And we talked about this. Like, if you flip, you talked about it the other way. If you flip Curry and Edwards and put Curry on Minnesota, like, that's a championship favorite.
The title favorite, yeah.
Just a perfect, like, not perfect, but I mean, with Towns' shooting and McDaniel's defense, and Conley is like a worse, like, Conley can do a little bit with the ball in his hands, but he's best used when he can just shoot and defend. and Curry would allow him to do that. But then if Curry wanted to play off ball, Conley can run the offense. And that's doesn't even mention Nickeil Alexander-Walker, whose defense has been incredible, shooting 37% from three, which is fine. So, yeah, this is a tough one for me because these impact metrics are, as we acknowledge all the time, are imperfect. And they are the best we have at fully trying to capture and gather true impact across, any subset of games. But they are also fluctuating from game to game. And it's not impossible to me that they're just not fully capturing something that Edwards is doing that's helping the team ascend to where they are, and it's maybe overrating things or underrating things that Curry's not doing that have held them back. I'm not saying that that's true. I'm just saying that I don't know. Maybe I'm starting from the conclusion, and that's my flaw. Maybe I'm just starting from, well, Edwards' team is the 1 seed and Curry's team is the 11 seed, and I'm looking for reasons to confirm why we should weigh that heavier. It can't properly capture it, but it just feels gross to me, I guess, because they are close enough where I just feel like, yeah, Edwards should just get even if it's 100 to a 92 or something. It just feels like the T-Wolves having 0 all-stars. It's just like, credit to Chris Finch, credit to the depth of that team, but there's just something feels off about that, and it wouldn't surprise me if people are like, what are you guys, fucking stupid? That doesn't make us wrong. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I totally hear that. This is an argument I feel really confident in. I'd be happy to, for people to drop comments, disagreeing and weighing in on what, why they think, the team success is very relevant to choosing all-stars. And I'd be open to hearing that feedback. For me, it's just like, you have to be able to independently extract like what you think this player is contributing in a vacuum, and we can't do that, right? Like that's a goal that we can have. It can be aspirational, but we'll never be successful at it. So we have to do the best we can at both imagining it, using the data that we have. That's like my goal. That's my end goal. So like if someone's end goal is to, again, like I said, for Mensa, reward teams or reward winning or incentivize winning, that's a different end goal, and I don't have that one. So that's where I start from. And I would also say, I think if a team is successful, it makes sense to look at like, wait, who are their best players, and what are those players doing to like cause or be responsible for the success? I think that's a natural inclination to have. It makes a lot of sense. I just don't think that because it's intuitive that it's necessarily correct, because I think that there is a lot more to having, if I look at the Wolves, having Conley play at a level where, I wasn't strongly considering him for an all-star reserve, but it's not crazy to consider him as an all-star, right? It's also not crazy to consider Rudy Gobert as an all-star. It's also not crazy to consider Karl Anthony Towns as an all-star, right? So we have 4 guys essentially that are like sub-ish all-stars, with Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who's had one of the best defensive impact seasons in the league right now. If you have guys at this like consistent high level, then it makes sense that they would be so good without having a guy who is at the level of a Steph Curry. And I think it's close between Curry and Edwards, but I think it's clearly Curry to me right now. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. And, we talk about it. Defensive impact metrics are a lot shakier than offensive impact metrics. So if, overall EPM, for example, has the 2 players is close, but one player is gathering more of his value from defense and than offense, it's probably fair to weigh the offense heavy player a little bit higher, just because those metrics are closer to sure, or closer to accurate, I guess. Is that fair to say?
Closer to, you can be more confident in them is how I would phrase it, probably. Yeah. Yeah.
I do think that we should, in spite of him not making our team, I do think that Edwards and, another guy who didn't make our team, Chet Holmgren, deserve flowers of some sort. However good you think his teammates are, Edwards has been the best player on the team that, is sitting at the top of the West right now. And we talked about them. This is another team that you talked about, you think can just be in the championship picture right now. That when we talked about the Timberwolves a month ago, again, I was a little bit skeptical, and you were like, I don't know, I think they just have enough. And I think you've come down a little bit after, watching them more. And yeah, I think the concern that you expressed to me is, okay, I'm just not sure how this team's going to score enough in the big moments, which is a reasonable concern. But they're 47 games in, they're half a game up on Denver. They're 2 full games up on the Clippers, who you just said a few minutes ago are your championship favorite, who have had lots of health luck. George and Harden, Kawhi have pretty much all played the full season. So it is impressive what the Timberwolves are doing. And you look at Edwards specifically, I mean, he's improved at the rim. He's improved from the mid-range, small improvement, and he's still not great. He's improved as a three-point shooter. He's doing all these things. He's self-creating a ton of their offense. He is the driving factor in their offense. And this says nothing of the fact that he once again is near the top of the league in defensive EPM. So at 22 years old, Edwards is an amazing player, and maybe he's not that anyone really cares, but maybe he's not a hot hand theory all-star this year, but it wouldn't surprise me if, down the line he's very easily in year after year.